Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for welcoming me to the Christian Network here today. It's so great to be part of this prayer time with you. My name's Gabriel Chan. As you might try and guess from my accent, you probably have to take a few goes, but I was born in the UK, raised in Hong Kong, and then moved back to the UK. So it's kind of ended up as a bit of a chameleon accent. But I'm part Chinese, which is why my surname is Chan. I'm the senior leader at Elim Church in Dunedin, which is a great pleasure and privilege to lead a thriving community here that's right on the doorstep of the university. I also chair the combined Dunedin churches group here in the city, which is roughly about 20, 25 churches and ministries that are part of that. And it's great to see a growing unity in the community. So I can quite confidently talk to what's happening in Dunedin, though I hear that there's good things happening more broadly in Otago as well, and in Southland, down in Invercargill, but you'll hear more from Keith or Malcolm later on that one. But I think that the main thing that we've really seen in the last 3-4 years has been an increased emphasis on prayer as a church community. Right across the churches, we've really focused our hearts on prayer. And we initiated, I'm sure you've heard of the Open Heaven sort of large gatherings that have been happening across the country. We initiated those in Dunedin in 2020, it would be 2023. And we started at 800. We've ended up at 2,000 last year. And that's with people coming from Oamaru, Alexandra, Balclutha, Invercargill, coming in to join us, as well as Lawrence and other places. So it's really been great to have a stirring to that sort of large gathering of prayer. But that's also spilled over into other prayer meetings. So now we have a quarterly United in Prayer meeting where the churches of the city get together to pray. And that's also spilling over into things like 24/7 prayer. And so we've got various churches doing 24/7 prayer meetings. I know the Baptist church locally has set up a cabin on their church property to have round-the-clock 24/7 prayer meetings. We as a church did 8 weeks of 24/7 prayer last year and have done about 4 this year. It's been great to see across a number of spaces increasing prayer. And that's not just prayer for prayer's sake, but it's prayer that's really beginning to move the spiritual atmosphere in the city. I remember maybe 4 years ago, there was a famous church that was getting in the papers a fair bit, and the local pastor here got a bit of grief from the university, and there was a lot of opposition to churches in that year. There was a lot of complaints about churches in that year. But as we started to pray, as we started to just declare grace over this city and God's presence over this city, now there's a whole lot of favor, a lot more people praying, and particularly on the university campus, a lot more people open to the gospel. So we're having conversations regularly on the campus with people about Jesus. A few anecdotes to share with you. We recently sent a whole bunch of students out to do mail drops in the student district, just dropping either invitation cards to churches or invitation cards to events. And we've had people turn up, like at churches. One at our church came in, he's like, I had just started reading the Bible and I'd said to God, if you're up there, he wasn't a Christian, had no Christian background, but if you're up there, God, what church should I go to? And the very next day he ends up with a flyer in his inbox, and so he comes into church and begins to engage. There was another guy who he had been invited to church during his undergraduate program, and then in his master's program, he thought, I'll come to church. So he came first Sunday. He enjoyed the worship, and he felt that the word was suitably challenging for his intellect. So he decided he would come the next week to camp. And instead of being challenged in his intellect, he met with God at camp, the student camp. The very next week, he got baptized. We're now a year later, and he's wanting to lead his own discipleship group, and so he's gone on with the Lord. We also had another situation where a Muslim girl had been about 3 months into her first year of health side to become a doctor, and her friend in her class just began to share Christ with her, and she was really open to the gospel, ended up giving her life to Christ, ended up getting baptized, ended up telling her whole family that she'd now become a Christian. And you may know that that's quite a big step for someone to take, leaving the faith. But she's sincerely following the Lord. And so we're really seeing, particularly amongst our young people, an openness to the Bible, an openness to being part of a church community and moving forward in their relationship with Jesus and now wanting to become disciple makers. So there's a whole lot to be grateful for and thankful for to what's happening. Because I don't know what you think about when someone says Dunedin. I mean, you're probably of the time when Dunedin was the place where they were burning couches and, all the Scarfies were having fun up and down the streets of the city. But it's really great to know that God is moving, particularly amongst our young people. Know that seeing that there are people that are out there that are hungry. And what I just would love to ask you to pray for prayer in. I didn't really have a whole lot more to say on the topic, but is that there is I think that unity comes with a purpose. It comes with this idea that God wants to prepare for a pouring out of His Spirit. He wants to prepare to do something in a place, and Dunedin. Part of why I love being in Dunedin is we're preparing the future leaders of New Zealand. They're here and in Canterbury and in Wellington, Auckland. There are major training centres, and we'd love to see young people getting influence in this really significant time in their life with the faith of Jesus Christ and gospel of Jesus Christ. And so that's a major thing on our heart, is that we wouldn't just have unity. We'd see that spill over into a move of the Spirit on the campuses, a move of the Spirit in the city. And I have been challenging, various people. Sometimes people can be a bit funny about, well, we're doing our bit on the campus, so can we not step on each other's toes and so on? But I've been trying to remind them that there's 25,000 students to reach. So there's more than enough people for us to connect with. And if we want to see Dunedin filled with the Spirit of God, we need 1,000 churches to serve all of the people of the city. So we just got to think a bit bigger than our community. So, but I do believe that there's this pouring out of God's Spirit in the sense of unity that we want to see transpire into more of a salvation move, hundreds of students coming to faith in Christ, lots of young people being discipled. And at this point, it seems that there's a hunger for that. So an example is that there's a meeting tomorrow about hosting Alpha on campus for students in the very first week of them arriving in the city, and a few churches getting involved in that initiative, and other outreach opportunities and events. And so we do want to see this unity transpire into something much more, and thinking about students. Another way that God's moving in the city is that we do get a lot of people moving to Dunedin. I think from a visa point of view, if you come to Dunedin, you get extra credit. I think they probably give people a scarf and a jacket and say, if you go to Dunedin for a couple of years, we'll let you stay. But it's a great blessing to have people come to our city and to be able to help them not just integrate to New Zealand, but be able to live out their faith here in New Zealand. And so that's another thought for us, is how do we reach out to our students, but also how do we reach out to new people in the city? And I think also the third one, obviously, is we don't want to see everyone that's coming and going from Dunedin encountering God. We want to see the people that are here in the city, that they would have that sense of, we're here to meet with God. And I know that just thinking about the different churches represented in this group, that there's a longing amongst some of the leaders, a number of the leaders in the city, to see the Spirit of God move and to see people coming to faith in our neighborhoods, to see districts like South Dunedin, people coming to faith, and there's very real needs. I'm sure others would point to these needs, things like the tent city that's happening on the Oval. There's a few people that are now living there. And so there are also social needs that we have in the city. So lots to focus on, but I thought just to focus our attention on students, new families, and then salvation beginning to happen in this beautiful city.
Keith Harrington sent a report that he was unable to be with us tonight. And so I'm asking Malcolm if you would share his report, please, and the prayer points that he has. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Grace. Keith Harrington, I think, if I remember rightly, is at Central Baptist in
Yes.
Invercargill. He writes that we have completed 22 weeks of soaking the city in prayer. When I first saw that phrase, I wondered whether he was going to be talking about the rain, but no, soaking the city in prayer as each church takes a week to pray intensively for the city. This time closed with a combined service called Simply Worship. We also meet about every 8 weeks as pastors and leaders. It's so encouraging to hear that unity amongst the pastors. He then says there is a spiritual openness over the city that many are sensing. Youth leaders across churches are working collaboratively. And if you know that kind of area, Invercargill is essentially a little regional capital all to itself. It really undergirds the ministry of that whole Southland, South Otago region, and it's so important that there's a unity of work in Invercargill. I think next year they might be joining with the New Zealand Christian Network prayer breakfasts, having an Invercargill prayer breakfast. So that'd be something to pray that this unity will continue. Keith has put a couple of 3 prayer points in for us, and Elizabeth, I think, has put those in the chat for us. Let me just draw your attention to those. He asks us to pray that God will continue to work in the hearts of church leaders, especially those who in the past have been resistant to meeting together. Secondly, that God would continue to draw people back to himself, those who have never known him and those who have moved away. And thirdly, that we will be able to build a connection with the new mayor and council. And that'd be wonderful to be able to have a partnership between churches and the civic life of down in Invercargill, where the churches are able to bless the city, very much like Gabriel has been praying for Dunedin, that they'll be able to be a blessing to that city, particularly when university leaders and city leaders have held the churches at a distance, and we need the Lord to melt people's hearts. Yeah, so they're the 3 points from down in Invercargill way.